My name is Maya Aldridge, and the first time I realized I no longer existed in my family wasn't when they stopped calling. It was when they replaced me with tulips. Not metaphorically. Literally. A vase of white tulips now stood where my photo used to hang, right between my sister Madeline and our father on the Aldridge family portrait wall. They hadn't moved the frame or rearranged the lineup. They'd simply removed me. Cleanly, quietly, like pressing delete on a memory that didn't quite fit the image. I stood there, in the polished silence of that marble foyer, the scent of lilies too sharp to be natural, and I knew. This wasn't just absence. This was erasure. 5 years in uniform. 5 years in war zones they couldn't even pronounce. But to them, I was still the daughter who left, not the one who served. The one who chose boots over pearls, purpose over performance. That night, I came back to a dinner I was never meant to be seen at, just tolerated. I sat beside the children's table, flanked by fine china and colder stares, until he saluted me. And everything, every silence, every smear, every missing photograph, cracked like crystal. They tried to forget me, but they forgot one thing. I remember everything. If this story speaks to you, if you've ever been the one they erased, but never the one who disappeared, leave a comment below. Your voice belongs here. Subscribe for more stories of truth, strength, and the quiet power of standing tall. The air inside the Aldridge estate was scented with over-polished wood and imported lilies, exactly the kind my stepmother liked to display when guests were expected. My heels clicked across the marble foyer as I paused before the portrait wall. Where once there had been a photo of the four of us, Robert, Karen, Madeline, and me, now there were only three. The gap where I once stood had been filled by a vase of fresh tulips. Symbolism so obvious it would have made me laugh if my stomach hadn't turned first. Last time I'd been here, my mother's silver-framed photo still stood on the mantel, defiantly polished by Aunt Ruth when no one else would. It was gone too. Major Aldridge. Karen's voice chimed behind me, syrupy with a pinch of salt. We weren't sure you'd come. She approached with a tight smile, her manicured hand fluttering toward my arm like she wasn't sure if she wanted to touch me or slap me. Quite the surprise, considering, well, everything. I offered a nod instead of a hug. Duty let up. Thought I'd stop by. How noble, she murmured, eyes scanning me as though trying to reconcile the uniformed Maya she remembered with the woman in a tailored black dress now standing in her foyer. Dinner's in the East Wing. We've made some changes, streamlined really. You'll notice. I already had. A few guests milled around the hallway, eyes darting toward me, then away. My father's voice echoed distantly from the formal parlor. He didn't emerge to greet me. Madeline came striding down the stairs like she owned the marble. Her hair was blown out to perfection, lips painted in some expensive shade that probably matched her heels. Well, well, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thought you were still in Djibouti or wherever? Iraq, I corrected calmly. Right, she said, dismissing it with a wave. Anyway, Mom said you'd come. Didn't believe it. You've missed a lot. Clearly. I gestured slightly toward the now trio portrait on the wall. Madeline followed my gaze. Oh, that? She said, voice light. We had it redone. You know, updated. It just looks cleaner this way. Sure. I didn't argue. There was no point. I moved past them into the main corridor. Everything gleamed. But it all felt curated, sterile. My fingers trailed along the wooden railing where my initials used to be etched next to Madeline's. M.A. plus M.A. Carved in secret with a butter knife when we were children. Sanded off, revarnished, forgotten. A hand gently touched my arm. Ruth. Her eyes were warm, lined with years and something that looked like quiet defiance. She didn't say anything, just slipped a folded card into my palm and squeezed once before walking away. The card read, "Thank you for coming. Don't let them change you." signed with a small heart and a looping R. Inside the dining hall, a string quartet played something elegant and empty. The long table was already half filled with guests in silk and tuxedos. I scanned for my name card and found it, tucked at the far end, just beside the children's cluster. My chair was smaller, the napkin folded less precisely. I sat. Didn't know ghosts still RSVP, a cousin muttered from the table beside me. His smirk faded quickly when no one laughed. Even the children looked unsure. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I'd been bleeding halfway across the world while they were repainting living room walls and re-editing memories? I turned my gaze to the silverware and counted my breaths. Madeline stood at the center of the main table, raising her crystal glass with the ease of someone born to toast herself. To family, she announced, her voice ringing clear. Those who matter and those who still hang around. I had fought in countries these people couldn't pronounce, and yet here I was just an afterthought with mismatched cutlery. The silverware in front of me didn't match. My dinner knife was shorter. The fork dulled. A napkin with a faint wine stain had been folded without care. Around me, the tables shimmered with gold-edged porcelain and stemware so fine it caught every flicker of candlelight. Across the room, Ruth caught my eye. Her expression was calm but firm, like a steady lighthouse through fog. Hold steady, you're not here for their approval. Wine flowed like small talk. Conversations floated above the table, light and artificial. I sipped water and kept my posture upright, watching as my family laughed too easily. Still don't understand why you chose the army. Karen's voice cut through a lull. So, unladylike. I mean, you always were a tomboy, I suppose. My smile was polite. It's a calling, not a costume. A calling, she echoed, stirring her wine. And here I thought young women these days were after softer things. Homes, children, stability. Some of us seek service, others seek security in other ways. I turned toward my plate, knowing the message would sting. A teenage cousin leaned toward me, curiosity shining beneath too much gel in his hair. Hey, did you ever, kill someone? The chatter faltered around us. Karen's lips twitched. Madeline looked pleased. I set down my fork. In my line of work, we protect people. That includes keeping others from dying. But have you... Enough. Ruth's voice came from farther down, sharper than usual. Madeline rose suddenly, clinking her glass. I just want to say how proud I am to have James here with us tonight. Not everyone finds a protector in this life. Some of us settle for medals, but others, she beamed toward the entrance, find someone real. The guests turned as James entered. Tall, composed, handsome in that forgettable, clean-cut way that made him seem born for silent wealth. He moved through the room like someone used to being watched, pausing at Madeline's side with a quiet smile. Then his gaze flicked to me, and it froze. Barely perceptible, but I saw it. The recognition, the stiffening of his shoulders, the instant mask sliding over his face. Madeline linked her arm through his. Everyone, this is James Whittaker. He's extraordinary, and I'll leave it at that for now. She winked, basking in attention. James nodded politely, eyes scanning the room, and landing on me again. Karen took another long sip of wine. Maya had a little episode after her mother died. She said loudly enough for several heads to tilt toward her. Took a leave from everything. Therapy, I think. Such a shame. She had so much promise. I didn't flinch. Just pressed my palms together beneath the table. Madeline giggled. But she bounced back, right? Back on the battlefield. James's voice cut in, low and even. Maya, you served near Fallujah, right? I met his gaze. Yes, we both did. His jaw tightened. Karen's brow lifted. Oh, did you know each other? Madeline looked mildly alarmed, as if she hadn't anticipated James's question, or my answer. We trained together, I said. Years ago. Karen hummed. Interesting. Madeline shifted in her seat. Well, that was a long time ago. James is building something real now, something permanent. Who knows? She tilted her glass playfully. Maybe we'll have another Aldridge engagement to celebrate soon. That's when I noticed it. James didn't look at her. He looked at me. Just for a second, but it was enough. I stood, folding my napkin slowly. Excuse me. I left the table, heels quiet on the marble floor as I stepped into the hall. The silence of the corridor was a relief, even if only for a moment. Then, "You're not going to say anything?" James's voice came behind me in a hush. The moment his heels clicked together and his hand rose to his brow, the room fell silent, because James wasn't saluting Madeline. The air in the main hall buzzed with champagne fizz and orchestrated laughter. Crystal flutes clinked. Waiters in black ties slid between clusters of guests offering refills, their silver trays catching firelight from the chandeliers overhead. Madeline stood on the small riser near the fireplace, where the Aldridge crest loomed in bronze. She radiated confidence in her emerald dress, holding her glass high like royalty presiding over a court. "We've all gathered to honor legacy tonight," she said, beaming. Aldridge legacy, of course. Built on tradition, ambition, excellence. My stomach coiled, but I kept my expression neutral. Next to me, Ruth's fingers lightly brushed mine. Barely a touch, a silent anchor. Madeline continued, "And I think it's time we looked forward to the next chapter. James and I, well," she gave a coy smile. "Let's just say there may be more to celebrate soon." The guests erupted into polite claps, a few speculative gasps, some giggles. Karen took that as her cue. "Legacy," she echoed, stepping forward with theatrical grace. "That's exactly what tonight is about. Some women," she said with a glance in my direction, "choose to walk away from it, from family, from expectations, and that's their choice. But others, like my Madeline, understand what it means to uphold a name, to build upon it." Several heads turned toward me. I said nothing. Karen sipped her wine. "You don't need medals to be honorable, after all." That was when James placed his glass, deliberately, on the nearest table. He stepped forward. The click of his shoes echoed unnaturally loud on the marble. Everyone watched, expecting him to take Madeline's side. Perhaps kneel, perhaps announce. But then he stopped in front of me and saluted. Proper, precise, military. Gasps cracked through the room like breaking glass. "Is he—" "Wait, to her?" Karen blinked, her mouth half open, unsure if she was witnessing performance or betrayal. James lowered his hand and said, loud enough for all 50-some guests to hear, "Major Maya Aldridge, Silver Star recipient, my former commanding officer." The hush that followed was physical, suffocating. Karen's wine glass slipped through her fingers and shattered on the floor, the red pooling across marble like blood. Robert didn't move. His arms hung at his sides, rigid. Madeline's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her jaw trembled, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. Only Ruth reacted. She pressed a tissue to her eyes and smiled behind it. I didn't blink. Didn't flinch. I simply nodded once. "I appreciate the introduction," I said, my voice steady. Then I turned and walked away, heels clicking in rhythm with my pulse, leaving behind 50 pairs of stunned eyes, and a silence louder than applause. They'd spent years pretending I didn't exist. Now they couldn't look me in the eyes. People moved like ghosts through the Aldridge estate, their formal wear and wine-stained napkins reduced to a blur of discomfort and whispered fragments. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, watching clusters of guests peel off one by one, some making quiet exits, others lingering just long enough to offer polite apologies they'd never have said an hour earlier. "We didn't know, Maya. You never said—" "I thought you'd just—" "Moved on." I nodded each time. No anger, just stillness. The truth didn't need volume. It only needed to be real. Ruth had taught me that. I spotted her near the foyer, speaking gently to an elderly couple from Lake Forest. Her eyes flicked toward me and held, a quiet solidarity exchanged without words. Then Karen appeared. She strode toward me in heels that sounded more confident than she looked. Her lipstick was smudged, and for once her hands were empty. No wine glass, no dagger-dipped compliments. "Well," she said, forcing a smile. "That was dramatic." I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "James overstepped. It was inappropriate. This wasn't about you." I turned slightly to face her. Number it never was. Karen's eyes narrowed. "You've always known how to make an entrance." "No," I said softly. "But I remember exits." Her expression faltered. "I remember when the tornado hit this place," I continued. "The roof caved in over the guest wing. The estimate came in at over 50,000. Karen folded her arms. "That was handled privately, by Robert and me." "No," I said. "I wired the money. Through Ruth, quietly. You never asked how the invoice vanished." A sharp intake of breath behind us. Ruth had walked over, arms clasped loosely. "She's telling the truth," Ruth said. "Maya covered it. All of it." Karen blinked. That was years ago. That doesn't mean—" "It means," I interrupted, "that you had no problem using my name when it benefited you. Just not when it mattered." Karen's mouth opened, then shut. Robert appeared behind her. He looked tired, older somehow, his suit suddenly ill-fitting against the weight of silence. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. Karen didn't answer. Her jaw clenched, then unclenched, fingers fidgeting near her pearls. I stepped away, walking slowly down the hall. The dining room was mostly empty now, but something caught my eye. An empty space on the bookshelf where the family photo album usually rested. I knew what was missing. The album had been selectively curated after I left. My childhood pictures vanished, my graduation page blank, my military commendations never inserted. From the pocket of my coat hanging near the doorway, I retrieved a slim binder, a duplicate. I placed it on the mantel. Karen's heels clicked behind me. "You always wanted attention, didn't you?" she hissed. "That's what all this is about." I turned to her, calm. Number I wanted decency. But now? I glanced at the empty space on the bookshelf. "I'm fine with silence." She stepped back. Then Ruth moved beside me and rested a gentle hand on my shoulder. "It's time the story had a new version," she said. And for the first time that evening, I saw the ripple of fear. Not in Karen's eyes, but in her silence. The room went quiet again. But this time it wasn't because of James. It was because a man in uniform asked for me. The last of the guests were settling back into conversation when the double doors of the main hall creaked open once more. Heads turned, expecting another relative arriving late, or perhaps a caterer. Instead, a tall figure in formal military dress stepped through with the precision of someone used to commanding attention. He walked with calm authority, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. "Major Maya Aldridge?" he said, his voice clear and deep. I stood, instincts tightening my spine before I could speak. "Yes." He approached, pulling a sealed envelope from his coat. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Donald Myers. I'm here on behalf of the U.S. Army and the Academy Board." Karen stiffened beside the buffet table, lips tightening. Madeline's eyes narrowed, arms folding. Myers continued, addressing the entire room without raising his voice. "It is my honor to deliver this invitation in person. Major Aldridge, you are formally requested to serve as keynote instructor for this summer's leadership initiative at West Point." Gasps flickered among the remaining guests. I took the envelope, its wax seal still unbroken, and looked up at him. There was pride in his posture. Genuine, not borrowed. Karen let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. "A summer camp? For cadets?" Myers turned to her without blinking. "A selective program reserved for future officers. Each keynote is hand-chosen. Major Aldridge's combat record, her Silver Star citation, and her mentoring track in Iraq made her the board's unanimous choice." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Madeline stared, the blood draining from her cheeks. Somewhere in the room, someone clapped once, unsure if it was appropriate. Myers extended his hand. "It would be an honor to have you. Your leadership has shaped more than one generation of soldiers." I shook it. "I'd be honored," I said, the words resting steady on my tongue. This time, when the applause came, it wasn't confused or scattered. It was hesitant at first, but Ruth began clapping with force and others followed. It wasn't universal. Not everyone could bring themselves to clap, but the sound filled the space that had once swallowed me whole. Robert took a step forward. His face had softened, furrowed now with a mixture of disbelief and something more brittle, regret. "I didn't know," he said, voice barely above the room's hush. Karen turned toward him sharply. "You didn't ask?" Silence followed. Not the stony kind, but the kind that makes space for what needs to be heard. Myers gave a respectful nod and turned to leave, his job done. I looked at Robert, holding his gaze. "You always said legacy mattered," I said. "I'm finally starting mine." I came for answers, but I left with something better. Peace. The morning air tasted clean, softened by dew clinging to the lawn and the faint scent of lilacs drifting from Ruth's garden. The Aldridge estate, once so towering in my memory, now loomed smaller under the gentle wash of dawn. Pale gold light stretched across the brick facade, reaching toward the gravel driveway where my car waited. Quiet. Ready. I stepped outside with my duffel in one hand and the photo album tucked against my ribs. My uniform pressed smooth, boots laced tight. I hadn't slept, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. Behind me, the door creaked. "Maya." Madeline's voice, small. I didn't turn around immediately. She caught up to me on the steps, arms wrapped around herself in a silk robe. Her eyes were red but dry. Her throat tightened. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I looked at her. "You knew better," I said. "But you chose silence." Her lip trembled. I didn't know how to stand up to them. "You did," I corrected. "You just didn't." I didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing left to ask. Nothing left to take. At the bottom of the steps, Ruth stood waiting near the car, holding a paper cup of coffee with both hands. Her eyes were kind, tired, full of unspoken words she'd never forced upon me. "You're ready," she said simply. "I am." She reached forward and pulled me into a hug, tight and warm. The kind that didn't beg me to stay but told me I mattered. "Don't let them define you," she whispered against my ear. "You never needed their table. You built your own." When we pulled apart, she pressed the coffee into my hands, gave one final nod, and stepped back. I opened the car door slowly and slid into the driver's seat, resting the album on my lap. For a moment, I just sat there. Then I flipped it open. The pages still bore the holes where my photos had once been. I reached for the one I brought. The photo I'd carried like armor all these years. Me, in uniform, standing beside my mother under the old maple tree. Her arm around me, proud. With quiet precision, I slid it into place. No tape, no caption, just truth. I closed the album and exhaled. The engine rumbled awake. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as I eased down the long driveway, sunbeams slicing through the tree canopy. And then, at the very end of the path, James stood beside his car. Still. Waiting. He didn't wave, didn't speak. He saluted. I stopped. My window was down. The breeze touched my face. I raised my hand in return. A clean, practiced salute. Steady, unwavering. Then I lowered it, shifted into drive, and kept going. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not once. As the estate faded behind me, swallowed by a line of trees and shadows long from the morning sun, I felt no need to check if anyone watched me leave. I already knew who truly saw me, and who never had. The applause had died hours ago. The whispers, the stares, the clink of wine glasses raised to someone else's name. All of it felt distant now, like static from a station I'd long stopped tuning into. What remained was silence. And strangely, I welcomed it. They had spent so many years pretending I didn't matter, cutting me out of photos, speeches, family gatherings, as if absence could make me disappear, as if my service, my sacrifices, my grief, my growth had no weight unless they chose to recognize it. But truth doesn't need permission to exist. It only needs space. And last night, it had taken all the space in the room. James's salute wasn't about me. Not really. It was about who I had become, regardless of who they believed I was. His hand raised toward me. Toward Major Maya Aldridge, Silver Star recipient, keynote instructor, daughter of a woman whose name had long been forgotten at that table, wasn't an act of loyalty. It was an act of clarity. It reminded them, and maybe even reminded me, that I wasn't invisible. I had simply outgrown the frame they had tried to stuff me into. The younger me might have lashed out, might have shouted, might have begged for acknowledgement. But I had learned, through deployments and decisions, that the loudest power comes in knowing you don't need the validation you once craved. So I stood tall when they sat in shame. I walked away when they stumbled for words. I didn't have to raise my voice, because the truth did that for me. Karen couldn't rewrite the narrative anymore. Not when Ruth stood beside me. Not when the program director from West Point addressed me as a mentor to the next generation. Not when even Madeline, who once bathed in the spotlight of selective love, looked at me not with contempt, but with something dangerously close to regret. And my father? He didn't say much, but maybe that was enough. Silence can be hollow, or it can be heavy. His felt like the latter. I didn't forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I also didn't hate him. I simply let go. Let go of needing his pride. Let go of needing that seat at their table. Let go of wondering what I had to do to be enough. Because the truth is, I'd already done it. Long ago. On dusty roads far from Naperville, in battlefields, in hospital tents, in empty barracks where I wrote letters I never sent. In choosing to return, not for them, but for me. In standing in that hallway with the album in my hands and reclaiming what they had taken. Peace didn't come from revenge. It came from the refusal to let their judgment define me. And when James saluted me at the driveway, not for show, not for drama, but because respect, once earned, never fades, I finally understood what my mother must have always known. Legacy isn't what others give you. It's what you refuse to lose. That photo, me in uniform beside her, now lived inside the album they once erased me from. But more importantly, it lived in me. In every choice to walk away with grace instead of bitterness. In every moment I chose dignity over spectacle. I didn't come for applause. I came for truth. And I left with it in my pocket, stitched into the seams of my uniform, pulsing beneath my skin like a second heartbeat. No one could take that from me again. They tried to erase her, but she rewrote the ending. Maya didn't fight back with fury. She stood with quiet truth, and that was louder than any accusation. Injustice thrives when people remain silent, but when one person dares to reclaim their story, even the strongest walls of denial begin to crack. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late. But once struck, it echoes through every room that tried to forget it. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Not everyone has the patience to follow a journey that doesn't explode in fire or fury, but simply unfolds in truth, and in the silence that was finally broken. If you've ever been forgotten in your own home, erased from family gatherings, told you were too sensitive, too different, then maybe you understand. Sometimes you don't need to fight to be heard. Sometimes simply refusing to stay silent is enough. I didn't come back for forgiveness. I didn't return to reclaim a seat at the table they once pulled away from me. I came back to say to myself, Maya, you are still whole. And if someone out there is holding the pieces their family tried to throw away, I hope you find a way to put yourself back together, in your own way. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment below. Even just a simple, "I understand," might be enough to make someone else feel less alone. Don't forget to subscribe if you believe in the power of truth, of quiet resilience, and of stories that don't need to scream to be heard. Thank you for staying till the very end, for listening, not just watching. Every view you give doesn't just help this video reach others. It helps someone who's been forgotten know they are not invisible. And the truth, even when it arrives late, is still the truth. I'll see you in the next story, where the ones who were pushed out walk back in, but this time standing tall.